The Honourable Mark Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant President.
Deputy.
Animal agriculture. Animal agriculture is reaching a crisis point in Australia. There are multiple challenges ahead for Australia's farmers, from the impacts of the climate emergency, over-exploitation of land and water, and how farmed, wild and introduced animals are treated. Farmers cannot continue to do what they have always done because it no longer works. The consequences because it no longer works. In fact, it never did. The environment and animals have always suffered as a consequence of farming. The consequences of that harm are now unavoidable. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC's leaked report on land use made it clear that it will be impossible to keep global temperature at safe levels unless there is also a transformation in the way the world produces food and manages land, quote unquote. The IPCC proposes a major shift to plant-based diets in order to reduce agricultural land use, freeing land to be returned for habitat and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Government needs to speak honestly with our farmers and help them with funding to adjust to a new world, including changes in social attitudes about who and how we farm. I say who we farm because animal activists are making it clear that the recognition of individual animal sentience demands change. The very raison d'etre of farming animals for food is in question. These concerns can no longer be brushed aside as the rantings of a few individuals, given that 2 million Australians are now following a predominantly plant-based diet. Barely a week goes by without yet another expose of animal cruelty, such as last fortnight, the eye gouging and breaking of tails cows at a large Tasmanian dairy, cruelty charges finally laid against Emmanuel exporters for their horrific treatment of sheep frying to death on the Awassi Express, and the illegal Victorian abattoir where sheep suffered agonising and prolonged deaths. In a report commissioned by the federal government, quote, Australia's shifting mindset on farm animal welfare, unquote, the findings should be a wake-up call to all animal farmers. 95% of people want to see improvements in animal welfare, and the report states that the major driver of this shift is an increased focus on the animal's level of sentience and related capabilities. This research indicates a fundamental community belief that animals are entitled to the protection of relevant rights and freedoms, closely aligning with the activist sentiment. These beliefs are spread across states and territories and between capital cities, regional towns and rural areas. You would expect the New South Wales industry leaders and the Berejiklian government would be chastened by these existential threats to animal agriculture. Sadly, they have only paid attention to the spin doctors and pandered to the fearmongers. As one example of spin without substance, the New South Wales Farmers Delegates at an annual conference last week passed a motion that animal industries use the term processing in lieu of and to the complete exclusion of the term slaughter. Do they think that the public will not notice that animals are still transported to slaughter to be killed? We have seen the Berejiklian government's response to animal activism and community concerns about farmed animal cruelty. Instead of overhauling the investigation and enforcement of animal welfare laws or funding research into emerging industries of alternative proteins, we have the, quote, right to farm dogma and the draconian penalties for farm trespass under the fig leaf of biosecurity. We need to reimagine the Australian landscape with farms that grow plant proteins, that integrate into the environment, take less water from our rivers, and where our wild animals are once again able to share in our boundless landscape.
Deputy President.